Morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Maisha Hutton. I'm the Executive Director of the Healthy Caribbean Coalition. Delighted to have you here for this webinar today entitled Act on Facts, Let's Do Better for the Children. We're really pleased. We have an excellent panel today. We're talking about school food environments in CARICOM and how we can accelerate the implementation of policies which remove ultra-processed products from our schools and in tandem with that, address the marketing of these products in our schools. A bit of quick housekeeping. As always, we would like our webinars to be interactive, so please use the chat, share your comments, share what organization you're from. We're delighted to have you. And please use it to ask questions. There's a Q&A function. Our panelists will be on hand monitoring the Q&A function to respond to your questions in real time. So with that said, I'm going to open up and invite Dr. Tamara Remy. She is a board member of the Healthy Caribbean Coalition. She's also the president of the St. Lucia Cancer Society, and she is a surgeon, and she's going to be delivering your opening remarks. Over to you.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to this important webinar, Act on Facts, the Food in Our Schools Matter. Let's do better for the children. Today, we come together as advocates, policymakers, educators, and public health experts to address the pressing issue that affects the health and future of our children, which is the food environments in our schools. These two complementary campaigns aim to promote healthier food environments in schools and support policies that regulate the sale and marketing of unhealthy foods and drinks. Today, they represent the continued collaborative efforts of the HCC and a wide array of regional and national partners, including PAHO, OECS Commission, CARPHA, UNICEF, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, FAO, the Global Health Advocacy Incubator, GHAI, the Heart and Stroke Foundation of Barbados, the Heart Foundation of Jamaica, the Jamaica Youth Advocacy Network, and with the support of civil society organizations throughout the region. These campaigns also represent the relentless, tireless, and continued joint efforts of the HCC, its regional partners, youth advocacy groups, and local CSO groups who are working to protect our children's health. Allow me to share just very briefly the historical perspective leading up to today's webinar. So in 2022, the Act on Facts campaign was first launched, focusing on encouraging the public and policymakers to prioritize policies that increase access to nutritious foods, healthier snacks, and drinking water in schools, while at the same time limiting the availability of unhealthy options. This campaign also supported the use of octagonal warning labels on food packaging to help consumers identify products that were high in unhealthy ingredients. Fast Track to 2024, Hope for the Future, which was a youth-led regional activity that highlighted youth support for school nutrition policies in and around schools. Youth leaders starting in the Bahamas and Montserrat, and including Antigua and Barbuda, Barbados, Dominica, Grenada, Jamaica, St. Lucia, and Trinidad and Tobago, partnered with local civil society organizations to raise awareness and engage key stakeholders and schools. In April of this year, we saw the launch of the digital campaign, Let's Do Better for the Children. And in this month, May, the relaunch of a 4-week digital campaign, Act on Facts, the Food in School Matters. So what exactly are the facts? 1 in 3 Caribbean children is living with overweight or obesity, and this number is predicted to increase. The primary drivers of childhood obesity in the Caribbean are unhealthy diets, which are ultra-processed products, including sweet, sugary beverages, and sedentary lifestyles. Exposure to food marketing has been identified as a risk factor for the development of childhood obesity. We know that industry interference is a significant obstacle to efforts at creating supportive food environments. There is a clear link between exposure to unhealthy food marketing and unhealthy eating habits in children. We also know that children spend a significant amount of time in school, and that this school environment plays a critical role in shaping health outcomes. These are the facts. Our work today is to address these facts, discuss the experiences, the challenges, as well as the successes in implementing school nutrition policies, and explore how we can collectively push for stronger measures to regulate the sale and marketing of unhealthy foods in and around our schools. So I invite you to use this platform to share your knowledge, to inspire action, and to reaffirm our commitment to safeguarding the health and rights of our children. Together, we can make a difference. So thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to the impactful discussions ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Remy, for setting the scene with those excellent remarks. We're going to jump into regional partner remarks, but before we do that, I want to acknowledge the presence of two regional leaders. Barbados and Jamaica have leapt ahead with their school nutrition policies. Barbados implemented in 2023, and Jamaica recently announced the approval of their school nutrition policy. And so we're delighted to have our keynote speakers today. First, the Honorable Davidson Ishmael, Minister of State in the Ministry of Health and Wellness in Barbados. We're delighted to have you, Minister. You've been a leader in this area, working closely with the Heart and Stroke Foundation in Barbados. And Dr. Tamar Stevenson. He is the Senior Education Officer, Policy Analysis and Research at the Planning and Development Division at the Ministry of Education, Skills, Youth and Information in Jamaica. We are delighted to have you, Dr. Stevenson. You've also worked closely with our partners, JAN and HFJ in Jamaica. So before we get to the keynote, I'm going to invite our regional partners to deliver remarks. We're going to start with Mrs. Lisa Sarju Singh Terrence. She is the Senior Technical Specialist in the Educational Development Management Unit at the OECS Commission. Dr. Gloria Giraldo, she is the NCD's and Mental Health Advisor at the PAHO Subregional Office in the Caribbean. Dr. Heather Armstrong, she is the head of the Chronic Disease and Injury Section at the Caribbean Public Health Agency, or CARPHA. And finally, Mr. Francine Jean, who is the Food and Security Officer at FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization. So with that, I invite you, Lisa, to deliver your opening comments.
Thank you, Maisha, and good morning to all. Good morning, esteemed colleagues, Honorable Minister. It is really a pleasure to be here today on behalf of the OECS Commission and the Education Development Management Unit. I thank the Healthy Caribbean Coalition and all partners for the opportunity to contribute to this important regional conversation. The OECS remains steadfast in its commitment to creating healthier school environments for every child. The data is clear and it is sobering, and we heard Dr. Tamari Remy remind us that 1 in 3 Caribbean children is living with overweight or obesity, driven largely by the unchecked availability and marketing of ultra-processed products, particularly in and around schools, as well as increasingly sedentary lifestyles. This is not just a public health crisis. It is a development challenge that threatens the well-being and future potential of our children in the region. As educators and policymakers, we recognize the powerful influence of school environments on shaping children's habits. That is why the OECS, through our initiatives and partnering with CARPHA, UNICEF, and others, we continue to support nutrition policy development, public awareness, and capacity building. We are proud to support campaigns like Act on Facts, the Food in Our Schools Matter, and Let's Do Better for the Children, which shine a necessary spotlight on the urgent need for strong, enforceable policies that protect our students from commercial exploitation and promoting nutritious, accessible food options. Let us use today's discussion as an opportunity to share lessons, amplify youth and civil society voices, and renew our collective resolve to act on facts for the health of our children and the future of our region. I thank you all.
Thank you, Lisa. Over to you, Gloria.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for the invitation. It is a pleasure to greet you from the PAHO Subregional Program Coordination for the Caribbean. As we've already heard today in the opening remarks, childhood obesity is a public health crisis. And we know this, we know the numbers, but I do want us to think 1 in 3 children. If you think about 3 children in your life, one of them may be suffering from overweight or obesity, which places them at very high risk for early onset of non-communicable diseases, diabetes, hypertension, but ultimately places them at risk of not enjoying a full, meaningful life that they deserve. From PAHO, we strongly support a whole of society approach. That is why being here is so important, because we see the strong civil society organizations, our development regional partners here in the Caribbean, all coming together to do better for our children, to be part of the campaigns that Healthy Caribbean Coalition has been leading with all these partners that encourage public and policymakers to support, to implement healthy food policies and measures that safeguard policymaking from the negative influence of unhealthy food and beverage industry. And we know schools are and must continue to be a front line of defense, a place where our children go to become intellectually, to blossom intellectually, but that they're also being, in a sense, inoculated against the pollution of unhealthy food. Therefore, they should be almost these sacred places where they could find healthy foods in schools, near schools. We support any processes that will help our policymakers in their critical role to implement strong evidence-based policies, like removing sugary drinks and ultra-processed foods from schools, and adopting the National School Nutrition Standard, as we will be hearing today, and ensuring those healthy meals in schools and around schools. To our educators, we encourage them to continue to be powerful agents of change by integrating nutrition, even physical activity into the daily learning, and promoting health positive school culture, laying the foundation for lifelong wellness. And to everyone in society, to parents, to anyone that is around children that they can influence positively by, again, supporting evidence-based policies that go from a range of front of package labeling to promoting campaigns such as the ones that are being promoted today, and to please always see PAHO and other development agencies in the region as sources of the evidence base that can help us get there and address this public health crisis. Thank you very much. And you're in for a wonderful webinar. Have a wonderful rest of the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Giraldo. And over to you, Dr. Armstrong.
Good morning, distinguished colleagues, policymakers, educators, and advocates across the region and beyond. It is certainly a pleasure to bring remarks on behalf of the Caribbean Public Health Agency. And today's webinar aligns with our regional commitment to the implementation of the 6-point policy package, addressing non-communicable diseases in the Caribbean, specifically in advancing policy point 1 with focus on the technical recommendations for the development of nutrition standards in Caribbean schools, a joint publication by CARFA and PAHO. We note from what has been said before that the Caribbean is facing alarming rates of childhood obesity and diet-related diseases, with our school environment acting as a pivotal point for intervention. And as the campaigns remind us, the time to act is now. The recommendation provides a roadmap, but successful implementation requires a whole of society, a whole of regional approach. The discussion on how to address the complex realities of policy implementation, including navigating the commercial pressures that often compromise children's health environments, and how countries can successfully translate recommendations into practical, culturally appropriate nutrition standards is important. Our children deserve evidence-based nutrition policies that are not influenced by commercial interests. And that is why CARFA is happy to contribute to and be part of this effort to move from recommendations to implementation, ensuring every Caribbean child has access to healthy school nutrition. The framework is established and the evidence is clear. Our goal is to act on these facts and do better for our children. Let's keep this in mind as we proceed with our discussions, and I look forward to a successful webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather, and over to you, Franson.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Maisha, and good morning to all of you. It is a privilege for us to participate in this very important event to share these remarks on behalf of our Sub-Regional Office for the Caribbean. As we congratulate HCC for bringing this event together, I would like to emphasize a few key points that frame the importance of this gathering for us at FAO and for food security and nutrition in the Caribbean as a whole. The most recent state of food and security in the world highlights the urgent need to change business as usual and addressing malnutrition, especially among children. If we do not make these changes, we will fail to meet the global nutrition targets of the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. Unfortunately, Caribbean countries' dependence on food imports, combined with unhealthy food marketing and recent crises such as the COVID-19 and regional conflicts, have driven the food prices, particularly healthy diets, to levels that leave the most vulnerable populations, particularly children, at risk of perpetuating a cycle of unhealthy eating habits. Addressing these trends requires integrated actions, such as the one we are having today, this gathering we are having today, which brings together stakeholders and resources from various institutions and sectors. In that regard, interventions across food systems and components such as food supply chains, food environments, and consumer behavior are essential. As such, as FAO continues to collaborate with the CARICOM Secretariat on the 25 by 25 strategy, we want to emphasize the significant role of programs like the school feeding programs in the Caribbean. School feeding programs have served as a tool to unite institutions such as ministries of agriculture, education, and health, and developing actions like creating comprehensive menus that offer a healthy diet made from local farmers' products, ultimately shaping the eating habits of children and communities. These programs have also been utilized to establish school gardens as an educational tool, teaching children about food and nutrition while fostering interest in agriculture. On this occasion, we in FAO, we would like to take a moment to recognize all these people, all these stakeholders working for and supporting school feeding programs throughout the Caribbean, striving to make these initiatives more sustainable, acting on facts, and doing better for our children. In conclusion, we would like to thank HCC and all our partners for the opportunity to work together and renew FAO's commitment to continue collaborating with all our partners in transforming agri-food system for our children and together with our children. Thank you.
Thank you, Franson, for those excellent remarks. Thank you all for those remarks. And what really stood out for me was a reminder from all of you of the unconscionable burden that we continue to face of obesity and by extension, NCDs amongst children in the Caribbean. The urgent need for us to move beyond business as usual, and the importance of global and regional frameworks, such as a 6-point policy package to kind of map and frame our action, and the importance of a food systems lens. And then the importance of a whole of society approach, which is really exemplified by this panel of diverse experts with various experiences from across all sectors. And in leveraging this whole of society approach, the critical importance of us to protect policymaking spaces, as well as places where children grow and thrive, such as schools, from industry interference. And finally, the importance of evidence in driving all of the policy action we have, and hence the theme of this webinar, to act on facts. And with that, I'm delighted to open up the floor to our keynote speakers. We'll begin with the Honorable Minister of State and the Ministry of Health and Wellness in Barbados. Minister Ishmael, please go ahead.
Hi, good morning, Maisha, and good morning to everyone. It is really a privilege and a pleasure to be here with you this morning. It is an honor to address you today. We all recognize the vital role that nutrition plays in the health and well-being of our children, and of course, the future of our nations. Today, I'll share the Barbados experience with our school nutrition policy, highlighting both our successes and the challenges that we've encountered. The school environment is a powerful catalyst which can shape habits that stay with our children for life. We know that unhealthy eating and inactivity established in childhood contribute significantly to obesity and non-communicable diseases, NCDs, such as diabetes and cardiovascular disease. These diseases not only affect our lives, but put a strain on our economies. Therefore, we must continue to act decisively to create school environments that support healthy choices. Barbados recognized the urgent need to address these issues. The Barbados School Nutrition Policy was conceptualized to address the deficits within the school environment. Creating a healthy school food environment is an objective which underlines one of the lines of action in the NCD strategic plan, which calls for the implementation of school-based prevention initiatives within the context of the Health Promoting Schools framework developed by the WHO. The Barbados School Nutrition Policy provides an operational framework for efforts aimed at creating an enabling school environment that promotes and supports the adoption of healthy eating and activity patterns. This includes establishing clear nutrition standards for foods and beverages sold in schools, addressing the marketing of unhealthy items to children, and enhancing nutrition and physical education to empower children with the knowledge and skills to lead healthy lives. This journey hasn't been without its hurdles. One of our early challenges was balancing the needs of all stakeholders. Vendors, students, school administrators, teachers, and parents all have their own perspectives and priorities. Finding the right collaborative approach has been a key part of the implementation process. Another issue that we have had to deal with is the change in the school curriculum to integrate nutrition and NCD education to better reinforce messages about making healthy decisions. Securing long-term, sustainable funding for these programs is always a challenge. I would like to mention our international partners such as PAHO and the Food and Agriculture Organization. We must continue to demonstrate the value of our program to secure additional resources. For countries working at varying levels of school nutrition policy development implementation, I offer these key pieces of advice. 1, context matters. Tailor your policy to your unique national context, your culture, and of course, your resources that are available. What works in Barbados might need to be adapted for somewhere else. Stakeholder engagement is number 2. This is key. Actively involve all stakeholders, ministries of health, ministries of education, school administrators, teachers, parents, vendors, civil society organizations, and of course, youth advocates, because ultimately their buy-in is critical for your success. The third piece of advice is to start small and think big. You don't have to implement everything at once. Prioritize your key areas, build on early successes, and just scale up gradually. Fourthly, data-driven decisions are important. Track your progress, monitor your outcomes, and use data to inform your policy and your program adjustments. This is an area where the Barbados School Nutrition Policy needs to be strengthened. We currently are working towards implementing a comprehensive monitoring and evaluation plan. And our National Nutrition Center continues to engage with our partners at PAHO and in academia to implement a comprehensive evaluation plan. Finally, Youth engagement is essential. Actively involve youth advocates in the process. They are the beneficiaries of these policies, and they can also be powerful agents and voices for change. In summary, investing in school nutrition policies is an investment in the future of Barbados and, of course, the wider region. It empowers our children to lead healthier lives. It reduces the burden, economic and social, of NCDs and contributes to stronger, more prosperous societies. Let us continue to collaborate, share best practices, and work together to create healthier school environments for all of our children here and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. That was excellent. Investing in SNPs or school nutrition policies is an investment in Barbados. Powerful, powerful words. And your advice, spot on. Context matters. And we've had people in the chat who are supporting that, the importance of cultural context, stakeholder engagement. And I think in Barbados, you've developed structures to support that engagement. Start small, think big. We're all resource limited. Build on those early successes and grow. Data-driven, we were reinforcing that message around the importance of evidence. And again, you're referring to actual tools to support the tracking and monitoring and using that information to improve programming and wrapping up with the power of youth as agents of change. Brilliant. Thank you very much, Minister Ishmael, for joining us today. We really appreciated that keynote address. And over to Jamaica, the new kid on the block. Congratulations on the approval of your school nutrition policy. Looking forward to hearing from you, Dr. Stevenson. Over to you.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. Masters of Ceremony, technical officers, ministers, and other colleagues, media representative, members from the civil society, youth advocate, ladies and gentlemen, good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are in this global space. It gives me great pleasure to bring greetings on behalf of Senator Dr. the Honorable Dana Morris Dixon, Minister of Education, Skills, Youth and Information at the Healthy Caribbean Coalition Regional Webinar. As you know, the ministry is committed to incorporating healthy eating throughout the Jamaican society. I stand here proud to indicate the fruitful result of years of hard work by the technocrats of the ministry, which recently culminated in the tabling of the National School Nutrition Policy and Standards. With the support from the Ministry of Health and Wellness, the mandate is to promote proper nutrition in public schools by implementing the National School Nutrition Policy and Standards. The effort is informed by research and recommendation from the United Nations, the World Health Organization, ensuring that the approach is both evidence-based and globally aligned. Before presenting the National School Nutrition Policy, the ministry led a robust and inclusive consultative process, engaging key stakeholders, including the students, the parents, school administrators, the youths, representatives from the Jamaica Manufacturers and Exporters Associations, NGOs, our vendors, and I have to single out our vendors because at the end of the day, there's no denying that irrespective of what is provided within the parameters of the school, once you go beyond the school gate, etc., then you are likely to have the vendors. And so the vendors played a critical part in this process. This approach was essential to securing public and stakeholder buy-in as it supports a broader goal of protecting the long-term health of our population by instilling healthy eating habits from an early age. So of course, during these discussions, the threat to good nutritional practices were highlighted. The draft policy took into consideration the food supply, the preparation and nutritional value of the food available in and around the schools. Prior to this, apart from sanitation requirements, the minimum standards in the nutritional value of food were lacking. Generally speaking, eating habits in our country are deeply rooted in cultural tradition, much like those of our regional neighbors. And so this forum aims to discuss two correlated campaigns, Act and Fact. The foods in our schools matter, and let's do better for our children. offering the opportunity to further explore ways to impact behavior change, perception, and attitudes to the policy. In fact, this promotes personal growth, choice, and autonomy by framing nutritious eating and a healthy lifestyle as key aspects of self-efficacy. In the meantime, and as we continue to strongly encourage schools to implement key supporting initiatives such as the National School Move Program, a flagship component of the Ministry of Health and Wellness, the Jamaica Moves in School campaign. Alongside this is the National School Garden Program, a collaborative effort involving the Ministries of Education, Youth and Information, as well as Agriculture, Fisheries, and Mining. These initiatives, colleagues work hand in hand to promote healthy, active lifestyles among students, while also teaching them to grow their own food for personal consumption. Importantly, at the primary level, the National School Garden Program is integrated into the curriculum, reinforcing both practical and academic learning through hands-on agricultural experience. Ladies and gentlemen, these efforts reflect our unwavering commitment to nurturing healthy new generations through education and action. I also wish to indicate that the tabling of the school nutrition policy is an indication that the government is committed to this process. And so the policy was approved by Cabinet as a white paper and has been laid in Parliament. This means there is still some latitude for us to further align our operational framework with the school nutrition environment. It is also important to note that the ministry recognizes that proper nutrition is directly linked to learning outcomes. As a result, we have been providing nutritious meals for students in public schools through the school feeding program and as well as the Nutrition Products Limited. The school feeding program provides nutritional support subsidy for the entire academic year to over 125,000 students at the infant, primary, and secondary levels, as well as feeding grant to over 33,000 students through the Early Childhood Commission. Additionally, the program supports students through Nutrition Products Limited, which produces and distributes nutritious breakfast snacks under the NutriBond component to over 18,000 students from 183 schools. This is also bolstered by the breakfast program, which serves students under the Program of Advancement through Health and Education part that currently supports an additional 50,884 students across another 641 schools daily. These and other initiatives, colleagues, sustain the framework of healthy food policies by our government. It is more than just part of a school curriculum. We are hoping it becomes standard cultural practice among our people. But I must also put into perspective that the policy underpins some critical strategic objectives. And those 5 objectives are: 1, to implement comprehensive nutritional standards and guidelines across all schools. 2, we want to enhance the nutritional status of children, thereby supporting their physical, social, and mental well-being. 3, we want to create school environment that promote healthy food choices, emphasizing the 6 food groups. 4, we want to expand access to nutritious dietary options in schools to meet student nutritional needs by 2030. And finally, we want to ensure all schools offer mandatory opportunities for physical activities across all the grade levels. And so the priority areas based on those strategic objectives are the food service environment and the education. 2, the provisions of meal. 3, the physical activity environment. 4, health promotion and lifestyle development. And 5, curriculum development. The policy will be implemented over 5 years, beginning with the academic year in September 2025. Its success will be underpinned by budgetary support and multi-sectoral collaboration, including ministries, departments, agencies, NGOs, civil societies, youth group organizations. But I also want to pinpoint that for those in the region and beyond seeking to develop similar policies and as Minister from Barbados would have earlier highlighted, there are some critical pointers I want to put forward. One, ensure that you have a comprehensive stakeholder mapping. Who are your key stakeholders? Who are your indirect stakeholders? And so we took a deliberate approach in terms of mapping our stakeholders. Two, the inclusion of civil society, the private sector, the youth voices. The youth, they are the champion, they are the one marketing, they are the one sending out the messages. Three, you have to look at the legislative and regulatory framework. Chances are what are being proposed in the policy, you might not necessarily have the legislative or the regulatory framework in place to support it. And so you want to ensure that there is alignment and articulation between their policy and the regulatory and the legislative framework. The development of a costed implementation plan, it's critical that not only do you have the activities, but the activities are costed. It gives you an idea, the ministry, an idea in terms of what are the projected expenses over the implementation of the plan. Five, you want to establish a robust monitoring and evaluation framework. It's critical because that is where you're actually going to be determining, what's working, what is not working, what is it that you will need to tweak. Six, the creation of implementation and committee working group. And finally, you want to use a phased approach to implementation. This regional gathering is of immense value, and it creates a unique space for policymakers and government representatives to share experiences, best practices, and forge lasting relationships. It ensures that policies transcend mere documentation and become powerful instruments of change. And so, colleagues, on behalf of Minister Morrison Dixon and the government of Jamaica, I extend sincere appreciation for this platform and wish all stakeholders continued success as we collectively strive to improve the health and future of our children. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stevenson. Wonderful opening remarks. And it's a delight to hear from both Jamaica and Barbados and see the alignment of messaging, the alignment of advice. I mean, that's the reason we're having this webinar, so that the other countries across the region who are at different stages along this process can hear from the experiences, early experiences, and experiences that have kind of been developed over time. And so we heard again about the importance of stakeholders. We heard the importance of evidence base. You mentioned the importance of alignment with existing legislation, very critical. That in terms of costing, the implementation plan, and we also heard about this from Minister, resourcing. Resourcing is so important. Very often we have these plans across the region and they're not resourced. M&E and reinforcing the importance of a phased approach. You also shared some innovative pieces, the school gardens, Jamaica Moves, and the importance, I think, as well, we've heard from Ministry of Health and now from Ministry of Education, and the critical importance of leadership from both of these ministries working together to implement these school nutrition policies. So thanks again, Dr. Stevenson. Thanks, Minister Ishmael. Wonderful scene-setting remarks. And we will now move into the next element of the program, and I'll hand over to Danielle Walwyn, who is our advocacy officer. Many of you are familiar with Danielle, and Danielle is going to share an overview of school food regulations across the Caribbean. Over to you, Danielle.
Thanks, Maisha, and good morning to everyone. I'm feeling very inspired by Minister and Dr. Stevenson's remarks. Really looking forward to keeping that tone of inspiration. I will be giving a very, very brief overview of kind of what we're seeing across the region in this space, and do want to acknowledge Ms. Doriel Quinton, who's a project assistant of HCC, who would have put together this presentation and really has been leading on this collaborative work among different stakeholders in this space. And I'll give you a bit more insight into that collaborative work. But just to give you a regional snapshot, you can kind of see what's happening in terms of regulations in schools, trying to monitor what's happening in terms of availability of foods within the school food environment. And you can kind of see an array of yellow and green and red, and I imagine you can tell what that means. And just to say that this is from our Childhood Obesity Prevention Scorecard, which you can find on the Healthy Caribbean Coalition's website. And just to delve in to some of the countries and their policies. So We have Bermuda, who would have been an early champion, having implemented their Bermuda Healthy Schools Nutrition Policy in 2006. And this would have really focused on what's happening in terms of availability of drinks as well as foods. And importantly, I did want to acknowledge that the responsible ministry for this policy was a collaboration, and I want to emphasize that, between the Ministry of Education and the Department of Health. So following Champion Bermuda, we have Trinidad and Tobago, which would have launched a cabinet paper, again, prohibiting the sale and serving of sugar-sweetened beverages in schools. This would have been implemented in September 2017. And I just want to point out at the very bottom of the slide here, in 2019, they would have noted compliance of 99% in primary schools and 97% in secondary schools. So again, some really inspirational work happening across the region. And again, responsible ministry, Ministry of Education, and the Ministry of Health. In Barbados, we would have heard from Minister Ishmael, and you're going to hear shortly from some of our partners who can speak more and give more emphasis on the details with the school nutrition policy. It would have been approved by Cabinet in 2022, launched in 2023, and now we're in the implementation phase. So there would be some restrictions on what's available in schools, and importantly, also looking at the marketing activities that are happening of unhealthy products in and around schools. And again, responsible ministry, the Ministry of Health, as well as the Ministry of Education. Jamaica, we would have just heard from Dr. Stevenson of the incredible work that has followed a significant amount of advocacy and preparation. So they would have had the interim guidelines created in 2018, fully implemented in 2023. And then, of course, the really great news of the tabling of the policy not too long ago. And again, we're seeing a collaboration between the Ministry of Education and Youth and the Ministry of Health and Wellness. And we're really looking forward to seeing that continued partnership as they move forward into the implementation phase. In the Bahamas, there is a standard, so a compulsory standards for healthy lunches in Bahamian schools and a compulsory standards for tuck shops, and that was implemented in 2011. There's also a ban that would have been put into effect in 2019, but it's not yet implemented. And again, we started hearing about some of the realistic challenges that we're experiencing in our environment. So continuing to have dialogue about what works, what doesn't work, and lessons learned, I think will be really useful in countries moving forward. We have Belize, who would have had a cabinet briefing in 2023 and a gradual banning of the sale of sugar-sweetened beverages in schools. And we're going to hear from Belize very shortly in our panel discussion, and they're going to speak about, Ms. Kathleen John's going to speak about kind of where they are right now along the journey. This was a responsible ministry, was developed by the Ministry of Education. Again, a number of other partners, local and regional, involved. In Grenada, there's a ban on carbonated beverages and snacks in public and private schools. This was announced in 2019. And again, not yet implemented, but we're seeing really great progress in Grenada. And we will have, again, in our panel discussion, some insight into what's happening on the ground. St. Lucia, there's a cabinet paper approval in 2021. And again, you can see some details here, ban on the sale and marketing of beverages, and responsible ministry, Ministry of Education, as well as the Ministry of Health and Wellness in St. Lucia. St. Vincent and the Grenadines, there's a school feeding policy awaiting cabinet approval. And of course, we have the school nutrition policy, which is at its draft stage, but again, some incredible work happening in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, complementary work. Dominica, school nutrition policy drafted in 2012, and in the process of obtaining approval. Dominica was incredible to see last year for our Hope for the Future initiative, which you're going to hear more about, which is a youth-led and CSO-led focused initiative trying to push for school nutrition policies, and we would have seen great interest from both the students and some key stakeholders in Dominica. So lots to celebrate along the way. Antigua and Barbuda, interestingly, a unique case. There's a health levy. It's a sugar-sweetened beverage taxation policy, which is currently being explored. But interestingly, within this policy, there's a restriction on the sale and marketing of sugar-sweetened beverages in and around schools. So an interesting take on trying to monitor what's happening in the schools, but through the sugar-sweetened beverage tax or the health levy approach. And that was quite a bit in a short period of time, but hopefully you get a sense of what's happening in the region. Some really great work, and we've already, I think, learned some key takeaways, some best buys. And I did want to highlight that a number of the stakeholders from the countries that I would have mentioned are part of Healthy Caribbean Coalition's Healthy School Network, School Food Network. We're really focusing on trying to bring together key stakeholders to get a better understanding of what's happening currently, how we can inspire each other, how we can provide technical guidance. So this is an existing group of representation from ministries of health, ministries of education, civil society organizations, youth. Some of our regional partners who've already given their opening remarks contribute to that group. So this is an ongoing effort, but again, just want to congratulate all the countries on the progress made so far, and hopefully this webinar will serve as continued inspiration. Thanks, Maisha.
Thanks, Danielle, for jumping in. So the world has us on our toes today. Our communications consultant, Tammy Marie, who leads all of our campaigns, was meant to develop and present the next presentation, but she's also had an emergency. So we're going to try and I'm going to kind of do a quick and dirty presentation. We're going to share the materials, just jumping to the website, and then Danielle's going to play the actual videos that are associated with the campaign materials. So bear with me for a moment here while I pull up the campaign page. So we have the two campaigns, which you've heard referenced throughout the webinar. The first one is the Food in Our Schools Matters, Policy Can Make a Difference. And the campaign was first launched, as you heard, back in 2022. We have a dedicated campaign page. We can see here the scope of partners, again, reinforcing that multi-sectoral approach. And here's a quick look at the campaign materials. So really trying to cover key messages that are relevant around school nutrition policies. So, highlighting children spend most of their time in schools, the importance of removing unhealthy foods and beverages from school settings, highlighting marketing, and sending kind of really clear messages. Selling, serving, and promoting unhealthy foods should not be allowed in schools. Also speaking about, the link between diets and learning, so there's, that academic, the cognitive link. Touching on the issue of water, and you're going to hear about this across the region. This is one of the challenges with school nutrition policies is, we're removing the certain products, and how are we increasing the consumption of water and healthier beverages? And then also farm to school. We heard Franson and FAO talk about the importance of school feeding programs and what are the types of programs that we're implementing to support investing in local farmers. So we have a direct pathway from local farming communities to schools to support healthier diets. And so this is a look at, this is the Act on Facts campaign. And let me switch to the Let's Do Better for Our Children campaign, which was recently launched. And this is around schools again, but this focuses very much explicitly on the marketing environment. And we all know across the region that phased approach, part of that phased approach is really getting our hands around how to deal with the marketing piece. And we all know in the education sector, many of these schools have resource limitations, and it's really forced them to turn towards private sector actors, and often private sector actors who have products and services that are unhealthy for children, in particular ultra-processed products. And so really much in direct conflict with the objective of school nutrition policies, which is to improve health. We heard Dr. Stevenson talking about nurturing a generation. And so this really undermines that objective. And so this campaign really speaks to that, it's time to ban the marketing of ultra-processed products in and around our schools. Now that's for the children. And we have a number of materials or cards which really attempt to educate the public and policymakers around why this message is important. So really undermining here what children eat and learn in school, where they spend much of their time, really forms lifelong habits. And this is really trying to illustrate that progression throughout life and ultimately leading to illness. And then, this again, hammering home this idea around, the sponsorships is who is this really for? On the surface, it may seem like it's for the children, but it is an opportunity to promote products. And again, as we said, undermine the objectives of these school nutrition policies. And so that's a quick look at the materials. I'm going to hand over to Danielle now to share the videos that are accompanied with both of these campaigns.
It's back to school time again. That means food and drink company sponsorship.
Just confirming that you can see the video.
I can't see the video.
Okay.
I
No,
don't
we can hear but can't see. Seeing now.
It's back to school time again. That means food and drink company sponsorships and donations and giveaways. Oh my. But is this good for our children? We know ultra-processed products are high in sugar, fat, sodium. We know they can lead to obesity, hypertension, and diabetes. And yet, we accept them for school events. Prove children who eat too much of these products develop more lifelong habits and disease. And yet we allow ads and branded items in schools that make them appealing to children? Are those donations and sponsorships really for the children? Or just marketing tricks to hook young customers? Just a way to look good to the public and buy their way into policymaking? I think we all see the truth. Next time we have to decide on a donation or sponsorship or on food policies, let's put our children's health first. It's time to plan the marketing of ultra-processed products in and around schools. Now that's for the children.
Thanks, Danielle. As we gear up for the next session, I'd wonder if we could just take a quick kind of informal poll in the chat. Who's seen those products, those materials online on your social media? Has anyone seen those? If you have, just raise your hand or drop in the chat that yes, you've seen them. Great, thanks, Hedda. You've seen them. Kathleen, you've seen them. Great. Okay, great. Now that's one of the things we always struggle with. Our budgets really don't compare to the budgets of many of these global UPP and regional giants. So our reach is really important. All right, well, thanks very much for that. So our next session is, Danielle, are you stepping in for that session? Is that why your camera's on? Great, because Doriel was to moderate the next session. Thanks very much, Danielle, for jumping in. Over to you.
Thanks, Maisha. So we would have heard a good overview of where we are regionally. We would have heard from our regional partners in terms of the OECS Commission, PAHO, CARFA, FAO. UNICEF wasn't able to attend today, but has been an incredible support. But we have had some incredible partners on the ground who have been supporting these campaigns and have had their own local campaigns in just complementary to the messaging around healthier school food environments, regulating the sale and marketing of ultra-processed products. So it's my pleasure to introduce representation from our local partners, Mrs. Francine Charles from the Heart and Stroke Foundation of Barbados, Mrs. Barbara McGaugh from the Heart Foundation of Jamaica, and Shanique Bowden from the Jamaica Youth Advocacy Network to share their reflections on the campaigns and describe one thing that their organization is really doing to push the needle and an ask from policymakers. So perhaps Francine, Barbara, and Shan, if I can ask you to turn on your cameras, and maybe we can start with you, Francine, in terms of your initial reflections.
Thank you so much, Danny, and just an excellent webinar thus far, and really happy that the Caribbean is realizing that it's important for us to do this together. What we have found since the policy was implemented is that a policy is obviously as strong as its enforcement. And I think it was mentioned in a number of the comments made so far that sometimes, apart from the policy itself, is the need for the regulatory framework for certain pieces of the policy to actually work. What we have found is that because we are doing a phase basis policy implementation, that what you may find is that we've started to remove the foods and drinks that are unhealthy from the schools. Definitely has been a strong compliance the SSB removal from schools. But the thing is, to do that and to still continue to promote, to advertise and to market these unhealthy products in the schools just can't work. Because obviously, as we know, this is probably the most aggressive and scientific form of promotion, is this ability to advertise and to market and to sponsor. And so we are now calling, now that the policy is implemented, for legislation and definitely strong enforcement on the ban of the marketing of unhealthy foods and drinks in the schools. And how we have done this now is that we actually had our first MMC campaign out of schools. Rosie is behind me there. She's been our champion. And our team in March this year actually launched that campaign. And I want to make a quick point, is that we have noticed that unlike some of the other policies that we have been advocating for, that we have an extremely strong we have extremely strong support. We're seeing much more, many more positive comments on our social media platforms than we usually would see, kind of supporting this particular call for the removal of sponsorship and the marketing of the unhealthy foods and drinks in school. And so we are also working with our partners on researching the best practice for how we could implement this legislation. Is it new legislation or is it additions to existing legislation? And then the final thing that we are doing is really beginning to sensitize the communities, especially within the private sector, encouraging non-food and bev actors to start looking at how they can support the schools, because we still do have to deal with the issue of funding.
Thank you, Francine. So lots of food for thought. And again, Barbados is in a unique position. You're in the implementation phase. As you said, it's really great to hear of the public. That's what we want, right? We keep doing this work so that we can raise it among the public so they can start demanding.
Absolutely.
And so with that, we have Jamaica, the new kid on the block, as Maisha referred earlier, Barbara and Shanique. So we would have just had the policy tabled in Jamaica. So much work and advocacy was leading up to that stage. Maybe we can start with you, Shanique, on your reflections, your thoughts, key asks moving forward in this really critical period.
So thank you, Danielle, and good morning, everyone. So yes, I think it's been a sort of interesting space to be in, having now the school nutrition policy approved. JAN specifically would have started this work formally in 2021, March. And at that time, we were hearing about the whispers that a policy has been drafted and it was supposed to be approved back in 2019. But then COVID happened, though COVID happened a full year and 3 months after. COVID happened and delayed that. And so it was very interesting coming in to what was essentially sort of the beginning of that process and seeing the policy, how it developed from there. So I do think in a very interesting way, the success of the policy is very much a success of JAN, HFJ, UNICEF Jamaica, and CARE, and the other groups that are working, because I do not think that without our advocacy, we would even see an approval today. We were very steadfast and almost a bit annoying in our insistence that this policy be worked on and be finalized. And I think that is a testament to our, our dedication, not only to the work, but to the fact that we collectively and individually believe that this is something that our children need. It's something that will allow them to be able to access healthier foods in schools. They spend so much time at school. Many of them rely on getting at least the one meal a day that they probably eat at school. And so it's very important that we are giving them their best chance. And the fact that the school environment is a regulated environment would suggest that that is the perfect place to start, in terms of regulating what it is that our children are exposed to. And many of the things that we want to see done, in terms of the limitations on like marketing and those things, it's a good way to start that at the school environment, or in the school environment rather. And so very excited that the policy has been approved. But what we're more interested in now is to see that the policy is implemented. Policies get approved every 5 years, but the implementation perhaps is something that we will show the real success and the real intentions of our policymakers if it is that they are really steadfast in how they are going about the implementation process. Of course, we recognize that in large part, the schools themselves have to, conform and buy into this, but we are also just very keen to see how the implementation plans that the ministry has drafted will materialize. We're interested to see what the guidance will look like in terms of what the food coming in should look like. We're interested to see how they will sort of use the school nutrition policy to sort of buttress things around vendor regulations and marketing regulations, and even how we consider, the FOPL process in all of this and what has been happening with that. I think it's an opportunity to see how we can also extend in a more meaningful way some of the other healthy food policies that we're advocating for. And so our focus is on the implementation. We're very excited to see and to insist that the implementation not just be something that they say they'll do, but will do. And so September 2025 is a very interesting time in terms of what the next 5 years will look like, where implementation of the Jamaica Solution Policy will begin, hopefully.
Thank you, Shanique. And Barbara, I don't know if you have any final thoughts there on kind of where we're headed. Shan set the stage with bringing it back to the children, and then of course focusing on the next steps with the implementation. Barbara, from your end?
Okay. Yes. So as we said, we have been involved for many years, a little bit before Jan. We've actually worked with the Ministry of Education and Health since 2019. And we were in part of the preparation also with CARE, our research partners. We are really excited that both ministries, have submitted, and following on from Shan's point, it's very, very important that we start to look at what the next steps are. I wanted to say to that working with the ministries is an example of public-private partnership, because we work, supported by the then Minister of Education to actually have access to the document and actually work with our research partners to make various changes. And I have to say, most of the changes were implemented. So our ask really, what we're doing to move the needle is supporting the key stakeholders in terms of sensitization, public education, and we've actually already been asked by the technical department of the Ministry of Education to come along with workshops and so on. We've also had workshops and sensitizations in the past. One ask for policymakers, please support the Ministry of Education and Health in implementing this program. The policy had broad bipartisan support, and that was what was important. So we did get the support. Also, when you're looking at the key priority areas that Dr. Timar mentioned, I want to highlight the school food environment and education, which is looking at prohibiting unhealthy foods and drinks, and also more locally grown foods used for meals and snacks. And secondly, of course, the providing of healthy meals. So we welcome the campaign, Act on Facts. Let's do it for the children. It's very timely, given what is happening in the region. As you can see from your landscape, several countries are involved and plan to be involved in looking at promoting a healthy school food environment. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Francine. Thank you, Shanique. Barbara, I'm just going to lean on one of the points that you made, which everyone emphasized, is that collaboration piece. It is not just these organizations that are represented here. We really do need a multi-sectoral approach to this. We do need multiple partners on the ground to support this, especially in the context of the implementation phase. And Francine, I know we haven't gotten a chance to get into it, but there's so many people on the ground that have made where we are possible. And Barbara and Shanique spoke to, of course, even to get to this stage, all the different partners in place. So this is a call to all of those. We have quite a number of folks on the call today from across the region, and probably this is something that we can pin as a best buy for the countries that are kind of moving along with this journey. So thank you three very, very much. They will be on, so feel free to pop any questions in the Q&A, and feel free to, of course, add any other comments in the Q&A. Thank you so much, and handing back over to Maisha. Thank you.
Thanks, Danielle. And it was great to hear from Francine and Barbara and Shan. We've heard from our leadership. We've heard from civil society, again, reinforcing this collaborative approach. And as Danielle said, there's so much to hear. I mean, Jayan and HFJ and HSFB have really led really strong coalitions at country level to drive and support governments in implementing these policies. And now we're going to hear from countries and hear examples across the region, and also hear from university, academia, and hear from child psychologists. So with that, I'd like to introduce invite our panelists for the panel discussion to turn your cameras on. I'm going to introduce all of the panelists now. We have Ms. Cecilia Neblett Brathwaite. She is a child development consultant and a marketing and behavior change specialist in behavior change at communication. And she's also a member of the Barbados Childhood Obesity Prevention Coalition. Welcome, Cecilia. Then we have Mrs. Nicole Foster, who is no stranger to HCC. She is our policy and technical advisor, but she also is she's a law lecturer at the University of the West Indies Faculty of Law here at Cave Hill in Barbados. And she's also the founder of the Law and Health Research Unit and done a lot of research with HCC in this area. Welcome, Nicole. And then we have Ms. Hedda Phillips-Boyce. She is the Senior Education Officer in the Ministry of Education, Technological and Vocational Training in Barbados. And Hedda has been at the helm of the ship from the Ministry of Education in Barbados, leading this charge for many, many years. So welcome, Hedda. And then we're really privileged as well to have a chair of a regional NCD commission, the Grenada NCD Commission, Dr. Jane Noel. Delighted to have you, Jane. And then we have from Belize, the FAO coordinator, but we also have Kathleen Wan is also the school feeding coordinator at the Ministry of Education, Science and Technology in Belize. Welcome, Kathleen. And finally, last but definitely not least, we have Ms. Natalia Burton. She's a project assistant at the Jamaica Youth Advocacy Network. Welcome, Natalia. Thanks to you all for joining today. So we're going to kick off the conversation with Cecilia. And we're kicking it off with Cecilia because we're talking about, one of is children in schools and the vulnerability of children. And we're going to kind of get right into, how marketing affects children. So Cecilia, how do the various marketing strategies employed by unhealthy food and beverage industry, how do they affect children and their dietary choices? And what are some local examples that you're seeing on the ground?
Good morning to everyone. Happy to be here. Marketing targets children has significant psychological impacts. It strongly shapes their food preferences, influences their eating habits, ultimately impacts their overall health. Research shows that children exposed to such marketing often develop increased cravings for advertised products, facing greater difficulty in making healthier choices, and develop unrealistic beliefs that foods are good for them. We're looking at behavior change when we're looking at creating our campaigns for our children, because we recognize that these things are visual. You have the toys, sometimes you have sporting activities where there are sponsorship. So we need to make sure that persons understand their responsibilities. As JPJ theory on the cognitive development suggests, during the pre-operational stage, age 2 to 7, children cannot distinguish between media content and reality. They believe that everything shown in advertising is true. Between age 7 and 12, in the concrete operational stage, children start to understand the differences between fantasy and reality. But the reality is critically interpreted by advertising, which may remain limited. Even adolescents with more cognitive awareness are particularly responsive to particular trends and visual cue traits that make them especially vulnerable to target marketing of these unhealthy products. So brand loyalty often formed in these formative years through sensory appeal and emotional messaging, which are central to advertising strategies for unhealthy food products. In conclusion, to effectively address the negative influence of unhealthy foods and beverage marketing on children, we need to have a collective response with the stakeholders, the peer groups. We need to have the educators, the policymakers. We must be aware of the diverse channels used to reach young audiences. These would include television, the radio, online platforms. We have sporting activities as we see in Barbados. We need to have a restriction of unhealthy foods and beverages so that we can have restrictive frameworks that target marketers and target their strategies. So we can have behavior frameworks that include not only frameworks for the schools and the children, but also marketers so that we can understand the objective and the goals so that when we're creating our campaigns, we can have that on board and have that in mind when we're looking at fulfilling our mandates and our objectives. Where are we going with these channels? To the unfair exploitation of our children. So I think when we're trying to understand where marketers lead with their visions, we need to understand what is marketing, what are their goals and their objectives, what are their channels, so that when we are creating our campaigns, we can create a campaign that strategically targets at the root of these marketing goals and objectives. This is a collective framework that we're looking at here, because we recognize that with these campaigns, they target persons at different age groups. So segmentation, although it may seem a little bit stressful, is also important. So we must segment certain populations, we must segment certain age groups, we must segment the particular social statuses, so that we can have a holistic approach to our marketing strategies when we're looking at focusing directly at marketers.
Thank you, Cecilia. Really important that when we come up with our campaigns and we design those campaigns, we're using the kind of psychological principles that we know larger companies are using. You know, one of the words I picked up on in your comments was exploitation. And we often refer to this type of marketing as predatory. And that really then takes us into the kind of realm of rights. And that nicely brings us to our next speaker, Nicole. So Nicole, your question is, from a legal perspective and a human rights perspective, why is it essential to protect children from the exposure to marketing of ultra-processed products? And how can we use legislation to support this and create healthy food environments?
Hi, thanks, Maisha. And so to jump right in, the idea is that children have a right to health. Of the many rights that they have a right to health. And they have a right to their education, to play, to develop into their best selves. And one of the foundational principles, in fact, that inform the Convention on the Rights of the Child is that everything done for children must be in their best interest. And the interest of the child trumps everything. And so that makes it very clear to us then why stuff like UPP marketing and the predatory marketing in particular that we see in and around our schools and within our wider societies is deeply problematic and is in fact a violation of children's right to health. And in this regard, just to point out that obviously the obligations that are held in respect of fulfilling, protecting, and promoting the rights of children, respecting the rights of children, are those of our governments. So our governments have all, in the context of CARICOM, signed and ratified the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and many of us have in fact transformed that into domestic legislation. So it's actually enforceable at the domestic level. I know certainly Barbados, we very recently went through the process of passing the implementing legislation for Barbados, finally, after many years, long time since we had ratified the convention. And so what I wanted to highlight here as well is that all of these policies, particularly things like front-of-pack warning labels, for example, we have the UN Special Rapporteur on the Right to Health, making it very clear that this is a rights compliant, pro-human rights measure. And these are the types of policies that we're pushing in the context of regulating our school environments and ensuring that we don't have the sale and marketing of these unhealthy products. Because of course, things like front-of-pack warning labels would help us very easily identify what shouldn't be in our schools. But even going beyond that now, when we think about the obligations that governments have as it relates to protecting children, which is going specifically to this issue of predatory marketing, one aspect of the obligation that governments have is to protect. And that is to protect from the actions of third parties, so not things that government has done, things that third parties are doing that undermine the realization of children's right to health. And in this regard, I just wanted to very quickly reference the recent 2023 report of the UN Special Rapporteur on the Right to Health, on food, nutrition, on the right to health, where she very specifically and explicitly says that in some instances, government's failure to act and failure to safeguard the policy-making spaces and allowing industry to unduly influence these outcomes is in fact and can be seen as a violation of government's obligations in this space. And then now, so if we move now to the other aspect in terms of what can legislation do? So we know in Barbados, for example, we have policies, and in a number of the other territories, as we spoke of, we have policies. But legislation is one step up. Yeah. Legislation really provides that very strong, firm legal framework, and in particular, really gives the government a strong basis on which to act and to counter these activities, but also to provide that sort of scaffolding and support in terms of enforcement. Because many times then in the context of the legislation, what we would be seeing is provisions as it relates to failure to comply. What are the penalties associated with? Now, it's not to say that policies can't have penalties. They can. But as I said, legislation is just a step up from there. It's much more formal. And also, too, of course, legislation has the benefit of being a little bit more difficult to change. Policies can change from one administration to another, but legislation can be a little bit more difficult and involved to be changed. So that, in a nutshell, is why rights matter in this space, why law matters in this space, because of the obligations that our governments have to our children to ensure that they're able to fully realize their rights, including their right to health, which we know from the statements from countless UN special rapporteurs, also the commentaries coming out of the reporting coming out of the various treaty bodies, that these types of activities violate children's right to health, and there is an obligation on the part of governments to act. And in that regard, the best way they can act is by regulating the space through legislation, which gives them the opportunity to get the most bang for their buck. Over.
Thanks, Nicole, for reinforcing that child rights approach and also raising this issue of policy versus legislation. And I think back to both Minister and Dr. Stevenson's comments where, they reinforce this phased approach, and I think that's where we are with Barbados right now, turning to HEDA, a phased approach. Perhaps, we can tack the legislation on the end of that approach. So we're moving towards that. But let's get back to HEDA and the experience in Barbados. And HEDA, we really want to hear from you. What have been some of the challenges? What have been some of the successes and the lessons that you've learned in enforcing or implementing and enforcing the Barbados school nutrition policy, especially in the area of the marketing piece? Over to you, Hedda.
Thank you, Maisha, and good morning, good afternoon to colleagues and advocates. So in Barbados, we would have commenced with the Barbados school nutrition policy, and it started among our primary school and secondary school students in 2023. And as have been mentioned by the minister and a lot of people, members on the call, they suggested that it should be introduced in a phased approach, and that's exactly what Barbados did. So it has been a rocky road. We've had some challenges, but we've also had some successes. So our challenges, one of our major challenges is the itinerant vendor. Now, outside of our Barbadian schools, we usually have vendors who will sell snacks, and these snacks are not the healthiest snacks. But what I found quite disturbing is that we've had some of our parents who would buy these snacks for their children and allow them to take them into the school. The Ministry of Educational Transformation decided that when we see these children with the snacks, we would not take them away. We would use persuasion in order to encourage them not to bring them into the school, because the reality is we don't know if this is a child's breakfast. And to share with you, I went to a school just yesterday, and the principal shared that exact scenario where a child came in with a salty snack, and she reprimanded the child as to why are you having that snack, even though you've been taught that this is not good. Child said, "This is my breakfast." So we've made a decision that we will not be taken away, but we would continue with education. In the secondary schools, one major challenge that we have observed is that even though the majority of the schools have a safe environment and they are working towards, we're not quite there yet, but they're working towards having a fat-free, sugar-free, salt-free, so-called environment. Students, when they leave school, they flock to the vendors and the snack shops. So education is important. Marketing, of which I've heard quite a bit about. Marketing in Barbados has evolved. Many years ago, some marketers and distributors and manufacturers, they would give our students stationery. But it's now evolved to coming into schools on the guise of storytelling. So they're telling our students, telling the principals, they're coming in to tell our students stories, but at the end, they will give the students the snacks. So that is something that we're keeping our eye on. And they're also courting children to advertise their products. Adults, we would like our adults to model the behaviors. That would take some time. So these are some of this is not exhaustive, but these are some of the issues that we are experiencing at the moment. So it was just the challenges right now, Maisha, that you wanted me to share?
No, you can go ahead and share your successes and lessons learned.
All right, so our achievements. We have had some achievements also. The big one for us advocates in Barbados is we have more children drinking water. So when I go into the schools, I do not see the carbonated drink. For matter of fact, sorry, I shouldn't say I don't see. If I do see a carbonated drink, it would be one that a child brought in. So we have more children drinking water, and they're not just drinking 16 ounces. You see some students walking around with 64-ounce flasks, and they are drinking the water. And we have allowed our students to drink water during class time. And the reason why that we introduced that was so that if they drink the water, there'll be no desire to buy a juice, because we do allow 100% juice in the schools. We've tried banning the beverages with artificial sweeteners. We haven't been as successful in that. However, we are seeing a lot of improvement. So the Chief Education Officer, she suggested creating a monitoring team that will have oversight on the policy. So we have a Barbados School Nutrition Policy Implementation Committee. And that committee is made up of a number of stakeholders, of which Francine, who is on the call, is one. So we have meetings, well, we should have meetings once a month, but we're also busy. Sometimes that don't work out. But we do have meetings to discuss what we're seeing on the ground, what can we do in order to forge our policy ahead. So we have created some fun-filled activities for our students. We've created competitions that they've been involved in. PAHO also came on board and they sponsored a competition for our primary schools. And we were looking to see the schools that have actually implemented activities related to school nutrition policy. Some teachers have informed that they are integrating the policy into their subject. One that resonates for me is the Maths SBA, where we had a teacher who looked at the number of looked at a year group and looked at the forms to see which forms would drink the most water. So that became an SBA, which I thought was really good. I am particularly proud of our canteen concessionaires. We have canteen concessionaires who sell food in our secondary schools, and they have the majority of them, I must say, we're not 100% as yet. The majority of them have really made an effort to modify their menus and or to make changes. But what struck me just last week is that the School Nutrition Policy Implementation Committee was made aware that there were manufacturers trying to sell their items to our canteen concessionaires, and they called us to find out if they were on a compliant list that was created by the Heart and Stroke Foundation of Barbados. So I was particularly pleased about that because they see the importance of this policy. And because of we have a compliant snack and beverage list, we have manufacturers who are reformulating their products. And I just got a WhatsApp message from an individual who said that I think he might have, I don't know if you've heard, but there's a video going around that JF Kennedy?
RFK.
Yeah, RFK, thank you. There are a number of products that he is banning in the US. These that have the red dyes, the blue dyes, the green dyes. So someone sent me, not about 15 minutes ago, sent me a message to inform me that he is growing flowers that can be used as a substitute for dyes. So this is an indication that people they're buying into the policy. Thankfully for us in Barbados, the Heart and Stroke Foundation has been instrumental in putting out a lot of the PSAs. So that is how our people are learning. And of course, HCC has their PSAs that we have access to as well. My time is up.
Yes, thank you very much. That was excellent. There's so much learning from the Barbados experience and the partnership with the Heart and Stroke Foundation, the beverage list, the work with the vendors, which was highlighted in the keynote address. So lots to learn, and wanted to reinforce Danielle's comment earlier. We do have a regional network where we bring partners together to share and learn. And to really use those experiences to inspire action and to inform evidence-based policy. And so that brings us to Belize. Kathleen. And Kathleen, kudos. We are on the cusp, hopefully, of getting the school nutrition policy approved in Belize, and Kathleen has been leading this effort. So Kathleen, the question for you is, Belize is currently in the midst of this process. Can you highlight some key attributes of your policy? And then towards the end of your comments, perhaps just again, reinforce for us or share the value of that regional network in connecting countries across the region who are collectively working towards school nutrition policies. Over to you, Kathleen.
Thanks, Maisha. Sure. So just to give a little bit of background information about Belize's situation. So we very recently implemented a national government-sponsored National Healthy Start feeding program. It started in 2022. It was built on pilot programs run by the FAO using the Sustainable School Feeding model, but it was piloted up to the point of 2022 when it expanded nationally. And when we started expanding, we rapidly realized the urgency of getting a policy in place because we started to see all of the issues in the schools that the other countries have already highlighted, the sugar-sweetened beverage use, the high rates of ultra-processed foods, and then we also were able to do some data collection to find that our childhood obesity rates are very high and increasing as well. And so we knew we had to develop this policy as a framework and a roadmap for our schools going forward. We're very fortunate in Belize to have a strong multi-sectoral support. We have a National School Technical Committee composed of the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Agriculture, and our regional partners, FAO, WFP, PAHO, and our CSOs like the Cancer Society and the Kidney Association. And so we're able to get a lot of input So the policy as it is, it's based on the rights of the children and also the pillars of food security. So we really drill down into access, availability, utilization, stability. How can we make sure that our school environments promote those and sustain those? And the overall goal of the policy is to normalize healthy food and healthy habits in our schools, to switch that narrative where unhealthy foods have become a normal thing, to go back to normalizing healthy foods, healthy beverages, healthy habits, and making it easier for the children to make healthy choices every day. So being part of HCC's network has been very valuable. Belize, like many other countries. So we are a Central American country, but we do identify a lot with the Caribbean countries as far as our size, a lot of times our lack of resources, and our issues, like, for example, the high rates of childhood obesities. So to be able to learn from countries who are a couple of steps ahead in the process. For example, Barbados has been really great for us to learn their lessons. They're, a year or two ahead in their implementation. And so we can look and say, okay, down the road, we definitely are going to have to address vendors. It's something we will have to address. And so we can start recognizing that and start building that into and putting it into the policy as we develop it. We also got a lot of contribution from HCC in just building the policy. You guys actually commented and helped when we were, put inputs. But the other resources that has been particularly helpful is the community, bringing in the voices from the other countries, being able to utilize the documents that HCC has produced. It seems like when we have an issue, we can turn to HCC and we see there's a document, for example, conflict of interest, sugar sweetened beverages. And then we also were able to be part of the Act on Facts campaign. And we are like I said, a low resource country. So it was very valuable to us to be able to utilize that. We would not have been able to do something like that otherwise. So for me, being part of this has been quite a valuable experience, and I am very happy to continue to contribute and to learn from the other people in the HCC coalition.
Thanks, Kathleen. And we are walking with you hand in hand as you move towards implementing this policy, this community that we've developed. And I will say for all of you who are on the webinar, we invite stakeholders from the public sector, so ministries of health and education, sometimes agriculture, for example, in Grenada, as well as civil society actors and anyone else who's keen on supporting this in country to reach out to us about joining this network. We meet every 2 months, and it's really a wonderful space for sharing and learning. So with that, I'm going to turn to another member of this coalition, a chair of an NCD commission. Now, these are NCD commissions, as many of you will know, are mandated by Port of Spain. They are mechanisms for multi-sectoral engagement and really powerful tools when they're functioning well to support that multi-sectoral action. And Dr. Jane Noel has been leading the charge as the chair of the NCD Commission in Grenada for quite some time now, and has really focused through the Commission on childhood obesity prevention. So Jane, I was wondering if you could share experiences around advocating for the introduction or the implementation of the school nutrition policy in Grenada, and also from the perspective of a multi-sectoral mechanism, the NCD Commission, how has that partnership and that coalition helped to advance this agenda in Grenada?
Well, thank you, Maisha, and it's an honor to be here today representing Grenada. So, I mean, if we look a little bit about the history of where Grenada has come from, our national school nutrition policy really was finished back in December 2015, which is a good 10 years ago. That was through a collaboration with the Ministry of Education, the Grenada Food and Nutrition Council, PAHO, WHO, Ministry of Agriculture. So it was quite a comprehensive document. It obviously was triggered by the changes of diet patterns within the region and the two ends of nutrition. So you had the childhood obesity, but then you also had the malnutrition with vulnerability at the other end. So the policy was comprehensive about both. But looking at the policy now, it has not fully been enacted. It was passed, but it's now the enactation of that. And some of the areas have been, for instance, like health and family life education became a subject in primary and secondary level. So education was attacked by the policy. They push still for the 80% of local foods to be part of the national feeding program. But one of the things that was noted that was lacking from that original policy, and it shows how things have changed in 10 years and what our focus has changed, was the advertising to children of these sugar-sweetened beverages and unhealthy products. So as of actually the beginning of this year, the Grenada Food and Nutrition Council have now developed an action plan strategy. It's a 2025 to 2028 document, which clearly lists how actions are going to take place. And I'm really delighted to say that in that there is now an addition, and I'll read it. It says, under phase 2 of the application of this, under the vendors part is no posters, banners showing unhealthy foods and beverages shall be posted on school compounds, on fences, or any walls that are owned by the school. So that is an addition, although it won't be in the first part of application, it is in phase 2 and clearly marked. So that now is a step forwards. Now, one of the things that we realize is that there should be health in all policies and that all the policies link to each other. So we have at the NCNCDC been working with the Sports Council in the National Sports Policy, because obviously sport is also a key, and physical activity is key to the schools policy. But we've also now drafted, as of November last year, a childhood obesity policy, which is a very comprehensive document. And within that, we highlight the food and nutrition policy. And in that, we have strategy 4.3. It directly talks about fiscal policies and regulations of food marketing and labeling. So it's there. So that is now with the Ministry of Health under review, and hopefully under review by the other ministries for then hopefully finally passing, so we can start, because there is an action plan embedded in that. So this Acts on Facts campaign and the campaign that we've been running on the advertising, I'm happy to say that the Ministry of Health endorsed it and put the message out for us, which is a big step forward. So the NCD is really acting as a catalyst between, see, I've only got 14 seconds left, but from the ground point of view, we've also been working with Ministry of Education directly, and we have students from the MPH program at St. George's University, and we are actually doing our own research on water availability in schools. We are targeting sugar-sweetened beverages. There is a ban on them. It has not been enacted. It was starting to be enacted before COVID and the whole thing came to pieces, and it has not been policed since. So we're hitting it from the end of, if we're banning it, we have to make sure that water is provided and other safe drinks are provided. And we have questionnaires for parents, maybe for the first time, in bringing them in as a major stakeholder. To children, to principals, we're doing on the ground actual physical surveys. And even though we've been only started maybe about not even 2 weeks ago really with the surveys, we are getting an overwhelming response from parents that firstly, they are so happy that they are being asked. And the overall response already is that we want something healthier for our children. So whereas we're being told by Ministry of Education that potentially this is a very difficult thing to ban it. You know, the tuck shops give money to the schools. How are we going to ban it? Because they provide funding for our athletics events like the KFC relays, which is unbelievable. And yet on the ground, we're seeing that the parents appear to want it. So we're hoping that this study will give leverage to work with the Ministry of Education to actually really push for that part. And that part is in the original 2015 school policy. So there is no reason why it cannot be enacted. So we are hoping. And the other thing we're seeing is a total misunderstanding of what juice is, because we're taking photographs of what is being sold in the tuck shops. And a lot of them, no, they don't have necessarily the Coca-Cola and the Sprite, etc., but they have what they claim is juice that has absolutely nothing to do with juice. So that is definitely going to be a key educational topic for the principals and the vendors on that, and to develop a list of acceptable alternatives. All right. So we're hoping that we can drive change through actual Grenada data. So that's kind of our story at the moment.
Thanks, Jane. That's excellent. And I think that's something that we reflected on, and Francine and Hedda can comment on that, and also Jamaica as well. It's just that importance of getting stakeholder buy-in and parents buy-in from the outset, and how challenging that can be to get that buy-in. So I think the approach that you're using with a survey to really make them feel like they're part of the process and informing the implementation is a really powerful tool. And we've also seen that kind of misconception around juice. That's a consistent challenge that we're having to overcome, and I see those nodding. And I also note Lisa Hunt from St. Lucia commenting that they're having similar situations with their SSB ban in St. Lucia. So thanks for those comments, really useful sharing. And so now we're going to switch to Natalia. As I said, last but definitely not least, leading the charge. Natalia, I'm going to your presentation with a quick comment on Hope for the Future. So Healthy Caribbean Youth, the youth arm of HCC, in collaboration with regional partners, hosted a regional youth-led event in support of advancing the implementation of healthy school nutrition policies. The event was called Hope for the Future. It was implemented across 10 countries. And this was back in October 2024, the first kind of phase of Hope for the Future, and brought together young leaders leading multi-stakeholder events, calling for strategies to facilitate healthier school food environments. We just had the second round of Hope for the Future. Again, young people leading the charge. And this was implemented across this month of May. And we're delighted that Jamaica was also one of the participants in the Hope for the Future event, part 2. So Natalia, over to you to kind of wrap us up in this panel. Why do you think it's important to engage young people? And we heard about youth agents of change from Minister Ishmael at the outset, and how really you are the beneficiaries of these policies. So why is it important to get youth involved in advocating for healthy school food environments? And then your second part of your question is part of the Hope for Future campaign, advocating for healthier school food policies across the Caribbean, as you were part of this campaign. What specific strategies have youth advocates in JN used to raise awareness and push for change?
Yes, thank you for those questions. So I truly believe that there is nothing for youth without youth. So it's very imperative that youth are on board when it comes to actually enacting change to see healthier school environments here on the ground. One of my first reasons as to why we should be involved in advocacy is simply because we live it every day, right? So as students, and as young people, we witness firsthand how the poor food options and unhealthy school environments affect our focus, our energy levels, and even our long-term health. I remember being a student in high school and having a conversation with some of my friends after lunch, just discussing how utterly exhausted we were and how we weren't able to pay attention in class because we were experiencing what I didn't know at the time was like a sugar crash. So we live these experiences, and just to drop a few statistics, in 2017, over 30,000 young people were diagnosed with hypertension, and also 20% of Jamaican boys and 26.4% of Jamaican girls are classed as overweight. So we are experiencing the harsh realities of what's happening in our country. So we're not just on the outside looking in. We are at the heart of the issue, and it's our right to health that is being forsaken. So we really should be involved in shifting the narrative and actually enacting change. And my next point would be that, we shape culture, and culture in turn shapes policy. So a lot of what we say is heard. A lot of what we promote trends. So once we are acknowledging that, we are the consumers, a lot of these companies market with children as the primary target audience. So once young people are able to, receive the education, they're able to rally together, they're able to speak up about this, we are going to create a culture that says to these companies and to these policymakers, this is not okay. So I believe that a lot of the work that has been done, has been amplified by the voices of young people. We bring unique experiences and perspectives. We bring innovation to the table. And policymakers are all always keen to hear what we have to say because, you know, we are the future. So on the note of the future and hope for the future, I'll just delve into a bit of what Jayan has been doing here in Jamaica as one of the countries that is partaking in this campaign. So, you know, we have really been aggressive in our approach. We've put our demands in writing. So through open letters, through public statements, we have just made our stance very, very clear that, you know, we need the school nutrition policy to be implemented. And I'm happy to see that our recent boost in this message has paid off because it was tabled in Parliament. So we've just been very aggressive, very vocal. We've participated in media interviews. We have had sit-downs and we've had conversations with various stakeholders at various events. Sometimes it's even unrelated, but you know, young people, if it's one thing, we are going to hold a minister or we're going to hold a politician or a policymaker, and we're going to ensure they don't forget the message, and we're going to inculcate what we want into their minds. So that is also something that I would say young people really bring to the table when it comes to boosting any movement. And just something I would like to say in finality, you know, we really have met with the youth, other youth, where they are, which is in schools. So a lot of the times, young people have participated in peer-led health chats with JN and other partners like UNICEF, Heart Foundation, and we have gone into schools just educating young people, helping them to understand their rights, encouraging them to live healthier lifestyles. So we really have started small, but our movement is growing rapidly because young persons are reaching out to more young people and our voices are just becoming, you know, impossible to ignore. So that would be it from me.
Thank you, Natalia. That was brilliant. And I noted we are the heart of the issue. Our right to health is being forsaken. So, you know, really powerful words. So as we wrap up this panel and go to our veranda chat, I wanted to just reflect on or ask you all for a kind of a key takeaway. And globally right now, the global NCD community is looking towards September, where there's a UN high-level meeting on NCDs, where our leaders will again take stock of where we are and map the way forward in terms of priorities for NCD action to meet targets around NCDs in time for the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. As we seek to prioritize, you know, we're talking about healthy school food policies. What's your one key message to your policymaker? And you've got policymakers on the webinar today. What's your kind of key message that you can share with them to help to advance this and move this forward? And I'll start with Cecilia.
I think that the concept of marketing to children should be broader so that all the stakeholders could be involved here. Everything should be magnetized a little bit, whereby, you know, I can have a broader scope to my discipline so that we can have things like, for example, the amount of time that is spent by television, putting these advertisements out, the amount of time that we can go to Knapsack and see a particular brand being advertised. These are things that I would like to be magnified, whereby marketers can have some restrictions to what they do.
Great, thank you. And over to you, Nicole. One key message for policymakers.
So my key message is it starts and ends with human rights, and therefore it's important to take the necessary steps to allow children to realize those rights fully, and that includes safeguarding the policy-making spaces from undue influence from industry, ensuring that in all things, the best interests of the child are what guides our determinations and the final outcomes.
Thank you, Nicole. And Hedda, over to you.
My key message: stop advertising in our schools. The reality is, and this is a quote that we use at the ministry very often, if we don't take care of our children's wellness, we will have to take care of their illness. And our children are going to take our habits, the habits that we demonstrate to them, into the future when we are long gone. So we need to stop allowing marketers and distributors to market the foods in our schools. And I am particularly grieved about our sports, which is very contradictory. So that's my key message.
Thanks very much. Okay, and over to you, Jane.
Yes, I actually agree with what Heather was just saying. You know, I have been involved in sport for years and years in Grenada, and I think it can be scary for governments, for schools, that it all comes down to finances. They want to be able to finance their trophies and their ribbons for their children, and they're highlighting the prowess of the children. But there is no point having it if you are going to just poison the children while they're at these meets. And I think, you know, the legislators and the principals, they have to be brave. They just have to be brave and do the right thing. It's not even up for discussion. There is only one right thing to do here. And someone has to take the plunge and just stand up. When you stand up, people, you'll be surprised how easy the change is once one person stands up. That's my message.
Thanks, Jane. And Kathleen and Talia, wrapping up with you. We're short on time, so maybe 30 seconds each for that quick takeaway.
Okay, so just exactly what Hedda and Dr. Noel said, and I said this to my principals yesterday, you cannot ethically profit today off of your child's future health. That is not an ethical thing to do. You need to examine your practices in the schools. If you are making a profit off of your students, that is wrong and it needs to stop.
Thank you, Kathleen. And Natalia, wrap us up.
Yes, so I would just like to say that, you know, we're not just participants in the system. Young persons are the future change makers and leaders of tomorrow. So we need to be prioritizing their health, their rights over any profit, over any, you know, amount of good trade relations. And it's very important that we do that. So I really am happy with the progress that's being made on our school nutrition policy, and I would just like to call for action. So it's not just about getting it approved, it's about action and actually, you know, mitigating a lot of the effects that we see where young persons are falling prone to non-communicable diseases.
Thanks very much, Natalia. And thanks everyone for a wonderful panel. I appreciate all of your inputs, and we're going to move on to our final session. And I'll hand over to Danielle.
Thank you, Maisha, and thank you again to the panelists. That was powerful, some powerful messages, and so I'm hoping everyone took note of those. I am happy to be closing our session today, dubbed Veranda Chat. So I'm really pleased to be welcoming Mr. Akeem Williams. He's a youth parliamentarian from St. George Northeast, the National Youth Parliament of Grenada, within the Ministry of Health, Wellness, Religious Affairs, and Mental Health. He's also a community nutritionist with the Grenada Food and Nutrition Council. We're going to be in conversation with the Honorable Davidson Ishmael. So Honorable Davidson Ishmael from the Ministry of Health and Wellness in Barbados. And again, welcoming Dr. Timar Stevenson from the Ministry of Education in Jamaica. We would have heard these voices earlier, and so we're bringing it back as a close. So thank you all so much for joining. Just want to make sure that everyone is being seen as we're having our veranda chat. Okay, excellent. And Mr. Akeem. Wonderful. All right, gentlemen. So we're going to pretend like we're on our veranda. We just heard a lot of information, the successes, challenges, lessons learned in building and sustaining healthier school food environments. We just heard some very some very powerful on the ground experiences. We heard Natalia emphasizing literally what she experienced in the classrooms, the implications of consuming ultra-processed products. We heard about the strategies that our civil society powerhouses are suggesting in terms of moving the needle based on their own experiences in trying to push forward school nutrition policies, all under the backdrop of honoring a child's right to health, utilizing policies guided by evidence. And so, Minister Ishmael and Dr. Stevenson, I'm going to start with you. So with the implementation of the school nutrition policy in Barbados and the tabling of the policy in Jamaica, both governments have recognized the importance of creating and fostering healthier school food environments. Youth advocates, though, have consistently shared how difficult it is to make healthy choices, and we kind of heard a bit of that today when the environment itself is unsupportive. So what advice do you have for governments on maintaining a rights-based approach, one that makes the healthy choice the easy and accessible choice for all? So all that we've heard today, maybe I can start with you, Minister, and then we can move to Dr. Stevenson.
Yeah. Yes. Good morning, still. Thank you again for the opportunity to be a part of this part of the discussion. I found that the entire presentation and conversation today has been very useful. And I believe that this regional approach to these big topics and important topics is important for us to move the needle. And I do believe that some progress is better than no progress. So being able across the Caribbean, across CARICOM, across our individual territories to be able to have these conversations and to move the needle is very important. Ultimately, I think it comes down to listening. I will share some tips and some tricks that we've been seeking to employ here in Barbados, but I do think it comes down to listening to youth advocates and listening to all of our stakeholders. There's a very open communication process within the Barbados environment, where we have a government that is very consultative, where big decisions that have to be made really go towards stakeholders and the wider Barbadian public, generally speaking. So you're right to highlight the importance of creating and fostering a healthy school food environment. And of course, we understand and appreciate the challenges that youth advocates face when the environment is still and continues to be unsupportive. The Barbados School Nutrition Policy was conceptualized with the recognition that unhealthy eating and activity patterns established in childhood often persist into adulthood. And this contributes significantly to non-communicable diseases. The school environment is considered an ideal setting for intervention, offering various points for action, including school meals and, of course, the curriculum. Our school nutrition policy fundamentally recognizes that adequate nutrition and access to safe and nutritious food for children is essential for them to achieve the highest attainable standards of health. And we understand and appreciate that governments therefore need to prioritize addressing the root causes of poor health and ensure that availability of and access to adequate nutritious food and education is there for them to be empowered. Some of these actions that can be taken to advance this include improving eating and physical activity environments. In this regard, we're saying that we can enhance the physical and social aspects of eating environments in schools, such as providing designated dining areas and ensuring easy access to healthy options like water sources. Adopting a holistic approach to creating supportive physical activity environments that facilitate participation throughout the school day, promoting safe and enjoyable activities for all students. Sufficient equipment, infrastructure, space, and facilities for food storage and preparation are also important considerations. And even within the Barbados context, we have launched some initiatives when it comes to physical improving and increasing physical activity amongst our children within the school environment. It is activities, some play activities, hopscotch, some of our age-old games here in Barbados and probably across the Caribbean. We've introduced hopscotch and different things like that that have built into them health-related messaging. And we've launched this across, I think, four or more primary school plants across the island. And it is heartwarming to see our children engaging in those play activities. So whilst they're doing that, they're increasing their physical activity whilst at the same time embracing healthy information and of course, a healthier lifestyle. Secondly, we advocate for the strengthening of nutrition and physical education within the curriculum. And we're saying make comprehensive nutrition education and physical education mandatory subjects from preschool to secondary level. Ensure adequate time allocation and intensity for nutrition education. And this can be done through strengthening the teaching through age-appropriate instruction plans, with capacity building for teachers and integration with school food services and potential school gardens. There's also benefit in promoting WHO recommendation of 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity per day for students. Equipping students with knowledge, attitudes, and skills empowers them to make informed decisions. And finally, we need to build capacity and we need to engage our stakeholders. increase the capacity of school personnel, parents, and the wider community to support and reinforce healthy eating and increase physical activity, ensure sufficient training and support for teaching and food service staff, actively engage and mobilize key stakeholders, including parents, community development organizations, civil society, and especially youth advocates in supporting and monitoring policy implementation. Strategies for parent engagement must understand the socioeconomic cultural context of food choices, and youth advocates are considered powerful agents of change and should be actively involved. And it brings me back to the first point that I made. Very generally, we just need to listen. So while they're speaking, we as policymakers and those of us in the positions of operations, where we operationalize policy, we need to continuously listen to our advocates and our various stakeholders so that their information continuously helps us to adjust as we continue along the path of implementation. So those are my points.
Yep, no, excellent. Thank you, Minister. And again, well, you emphasized it. It's the listening piece. It's the centering of people. And I think it has been a theme throughout the webinar so far. And the shaping environments, I do want to pick on something that you said at the very start as well, is progress is progress. And you mentioned some simple and easy interventions that can be made along our journey. So again, we have a lot of ministry representatives from across the region who are on the call right now, and I hope that they are taking those steps into consideration. So thank you, Minister. I'm going to hand over to Dr. Stevenson. Same question. I don't know if you have any reflections on what Minister shared, but of course, I'm keen to hear your thoughts as well. And then Akeem, Mr. Williams, we're going to hop over to you. So welcome your reflections too. Dr. Stevenson?
Thank you. I endorse what the minister would have said in terms of listening. But what is also equally important is that we have a robust communication mechanism in place, because you can have a policy, but without that robust mechanism in place, then you would realize that a section of the population might not be aware or in terms of their roles and in terms of their responsibilities. And that is why we have ensured and continue to engage, not just with members of our civil society, but with our students, with our parents, our youth advocates. And separating apart from that is the policy is rooted in the child right perspective, and it's focused at all times on the fair treatment and best interest of the child in accordance with specifically Articles 2 and 3 of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. It also responds to Article 4, in which the government of Jamaica committed to taking all available measures to safeguard the rights of children, including assessing our social services and funding for these services to ensure that the children are protected. And more specifically, the Convention Article 24 provides children with the right to nutritious foods and information to help them stay healthy as part of the right to health and health care. And that is why some guiding principles that have been used in the development of the policy is equity and equality. Wherever you are, whatever your belief system are, you are not going to be disenfranchised, you are not going to be discriminated. And so equity and equality was one of those critical principles. The rights of the child, the right to good nutrition, and multi-sectoral approach to were other principles that guided the actual development of this policy, because the ministry cannot do it alone. And that is why it's not just a whole of ministry, but it's a whole of government approach. It's a public-private partnership. It's getting our farmers on board. It's getting our vendors to buy in to support these ideas, because at the end of the day, it is a win-win. Healthy nutrition is a win-win for the country. It's a win-win for the region. And that is why, we have been open. We have taken a consultative approach as a ministry, and we will continue to engage while at the same time respecting the fundamental rights and belief of all our youth. Because at the end of the day, as policymakers, it is important that we listen, and it is important that we also forge this partnership as we move forward. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Stevenson. And you picked up on something there that I was going to ask you about is yes, Jamaica has done a fantastic job on the consultative phase, but now that we're moving into implementation, still a great opportunity to keep youth and civil society engaged. And I appreciated your comment on the mechanism, a formalized mechanism perhaps for that ongoing engagement. And I also appreciate your point on equity, equality, and grounding our policies in that. So very good. Thank you all so much for hanging on with us. We are going to wrap up shortly, but if you can bear with us probably for another 10 minutes as we wrap up our conversation, we'd appreciate that. And so I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Williams, who is our youth parliamentarian on the call. And so Mr. Williams, I'm going to invite you to, comment on anything that's been said so far, but of course, also, we want to hear from you. Youth parliamentarians are in an extraordinary position. You can advance this agenda. We've seen it actually in Jamaica, a fantastic initiative by the youth parliamentarians in Jamaica to bring this forward to youth outside of kind of our immediate network. And we've seen the power of young people. We heard it from Natalia. We've kind of heard it reiterated from the panelists who are on the call with me right now. And so your reflections, Mr. Williams, on the role of youth parliamentarians, how we on the call can support you, and maybe just your reflections on the webinar and what Minister and Dr. Stevenson have shared so far.
Yes, please. Thank you so much for inviting me on. I would like to say this was an excellent webinar, and I really want to make them meet this way because I think the work that is started can have a big impact. Again, for me, the watch what is listen and listen. There's a why for the listening. You see, I think we all can agree that the world that we live in today as a young people it's a lot different to the world and the food environment 20, 30 years ago. And so now the biggest change that we have way more marketing and way more influence from the industry. But I say to my clients when I go to the schools and the PTA meetings, and we have been getting some very good feedback because what we have found recently, and this alarming study that came out that showed that 53% of ADHD symptoms can be improved simply by controlling the quality of our meals. That is a telling story. And so for our youth parliaments here in Grenada, some of the key areas that came up in terms of advocacy were issues such as mental health, issues such as overall education and the quality of education. Now that in itself provides us a barrier. So when we're looking at the rights of a child and our rights as young people, we also want to have the same equal opportunities that those who have gone before us have experienced and they've been able to enjoy now. And so way too often we see so many young people going through the entire school system, and I ask myself, I wonder how many of us are actually looking at those students who may have gone through the system, not done well, and I've asked ourselves, I wonder what is the role of the food environment in impacting the potential and the success of these children. And so we have to now come to this foundation. I want to also say that every human being, no matter who we are, from the cradle to the grave, we're going to eat. And so there is a lot of entropy that reminds us that a system left to itself moves towards this order. And I think over the years, I've looked at policymakers and I've heard the conversation, and way too many times the direction has been to leave it up to the individual responsibility, neglecting to accept in reality that our environment has a fundamental role in driving that. I think it's unreasonable and unfair when we have these large companies, they market their products, they benefit, they reap the rewards, and then our ministries, our governments, our taxpayers with our free healthcare system must come and pay the cost of the dialysis treatment because they can't afford it. They must come and pay the cost of the medical treatments and all of these things that come along with it. My question is, as young people, with inflation and the way the world is going, we have to ask ourselves when our time has arrived, not for ourselves, but for those who are our peers and our colleagues. What do we want to happen? What do we want to see? How are they going to be impacted? Now, I think that youth parliamentarians, we are at an excellent place. And I think here in Grenada, we recently had a new approach to the youth parliament process where youth parliamentarians are now elected. And so we had to go out and we had to campaign. And so we had our youth colleagues within our various constituencies going out and voting for the youth parliamentarian that they believe can make a difference and the vision that they would have ascribed to. I think advocacy now allows us to then go to the grassroots movement to have the conversations, to interact, because people will listen to people who who look like them, who hear like them, and who understands their struggle. And we are the only ones who are able to communicate. I often find that there's a big divide between the adult population and young people because our experiences are different and we are at two different places in life. And who else to communicate this message, to get this point across in a deep way, and to get the outcome that we're all hoping for, but our youth parliamentarians. I think it allows us to be able to do petitions and so forth, to really garner that support from the young people across the region. I want to encourage youth parliamentarians and persons who may know youth parliamentarians in the region. It's also a good point for us to advocate for a program, a youth parliament program that's not just where always has been before you, where you went on and you had discussions and you had debates, but now where you are actually elected in, and what you say has some measure of weight. Because when you go to the parliament building, you are not just going in as someone who was selected from speaking, but you're going in with the weight of your constituents behind you, with their support, knowing that what you're saying now comes from a different place. And so I think those are some key roles that we can advocate for, at changing youth parliament programs, but giving young people a seat at the table, but allowing our voice to actually matter. Not just say it and talk about it and talk around it, but give us that seat that matters, because at the end of the day, when all is said and done, we are the ones inheriting the future with the decision that is being made today.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Williams. And I saw Minister nodding and I saw Dr. Stevenson nodding as well. And hopefully that's a call to action also for those who are on the call. Another key group of all the groups that we've been speaking about is our youth parliamentarians, is our youth. Mr. Williams, I think that the guidance that you provided is very useful for so many of the youth advocates who are also on the ground as well. So with that, as we are tight for time, I just want to thank Minister Ishmael, Dr. Stevenson, particularly you two, especially because you stayed on for the entire time. I think that speaks volumes, and again, shows your commitment to this. So we really appreciate that. And Mr. Williams, we're going to follow up with you, and we're looking forward to working together collaboratively and hopefully getting some more youth parliamentarians on board. So thank you three so much. And I'm going to turn it over to Maisha for closing remarks. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. And I don't need to add too much to those wonderful closing remarks that Danielle just provided, and wrapping up with that wonderful session. I want to echo thanks to Minister Williams again, Minister Ishmael, for sticking around. Well, maybe future Minister Williams, Akeem Williams, our youth parliamentarian, and Dr. Stevenson for sticking around for the entire webinar, again, demonstrating your commitment. Thank you to the implementers working in the ministries of health, education, for our advocates, for research, for all of you stakeholders, and for you who have stayed on the call, our community from across all sectors who are collectively united around this goal. And I want to bring it back to one comment. Why are we here? We're here to nurture future generations, and guided by that goal, working together, we can succeed. So thank you all for joining us today. We look forward to working with all of you as we seek to advance this agenda across the Caribbean.